Welcome to CEO Interviews, a production of Gore.com, in which we speak to CEOs, or in this case, founders, about what's going on with their organizations. And this one is a very special interview. It's the second one with Terry Lynch, founder of Save Canadian Mining. That's the lobby group, for lack of a better term, the advocacy group that has been advocating on behalf of small cap issuers and small cap investors in Canada with respect to predatory short selling. They've been fighting that good fight with fantastic data, going to the OSC, the Canadian Securities Association, IIROC, and even provincial governments. And they've got some great movement that took place. October 1st, the Ontario Securities Commission, the OSC and IIROC, I won't go through their name too long, issued a press release where they stated, as outlined in joint whistleblower guidance published today, that was October 1st, the OSC and IIROC have reason to believe that certain market participants may be engaged in abusive short selling practices. Where are we hearing about that today, hey guys? So we're going to talk about that. And then they announced this massive bounty on predatory short sellers. Those who provide information to the OSC Whistleblower Program may be eligible for awards up to $5 million for tips that lead to an OSC enforcement action. What's been the effect on that? October 1st to today, the TSX Venture Index, which is the best probably measure of the small cap markets in Canada, up 33.5%. If that's happened to your portfolio, if you're happy with what's happened, yes, we have the OSC and IIROC to thank. We appreciate the effort. But who you really have to thank for kickstarting that is Terry and his group at Save Canadian Mining. Terry, welcome back, man.
Yeah, it's great to be here, George. Thank you for the lead, and it's nice to see things starting to turn in the direction of fairness and transparency, and we're seeing what we should see is investors start to benefit from it.
You've got to be thrilled with what you're seeing going on south of the border with respect to Wall Street bets, GameStop, and the big short squeeze there. But before we get to that, let's first talk about you guys taking care of business here in Canada first. So the OSC put out that letter with IIROC, that bounty letter on October 1st, and markets up 33%. How did you guys feel when that came out? And do you feel that that's played a big role in the disappearance of predatory short sellers since then?
Yeah, I think that was a great move by the OSC and IIROC. Put obviously some much needed spotlight in the mainstream media on the issue, and I think no doubt it's moved. What we hear, we've heard it's moved some of the actors in the game south of the border. That may not turn out to have been the best move for them.
Good luck there.
But that's what we heard. We heard some people have literally moved their operations south, and sort of maybe taking some of the pressure off. I still hear stories from our membership that there's still it's still not a blue ribbon day yet for mining. The short sellers are still there, but I think they're certainly looking over the shoulders, and well, they should be.
And then after we spoke, I can't remember if it was before we had our interview or afterwards, the SEC also came down, and I think this happened after we spoke. The SEC came down and fined Cormark Securities $800,000. Now, that's not a big amount of money, but we're going to talk about the implication, and I want to get your view on this. $800,000 for facilitating about $600 million of naked short selling.
Yeah.
And the amount wasn't big, but what do you think that does to compliance departments at brokerages all over Canada who are participating in this and now may fear civil action?
Well, we hope that's exactly what happens, is that these guys start to wake up and recognize that the legal liability they're incurring really without tremendous physical gain. It's a risk that the system is bearing, and not the brokers, and that's not fair. So I don't know the particular details of that case other than obviously what it was. I don't know what stocks they were implicated in and whatnot. But you think of $800,000 fine on a $600 million in trades. That's not even, is that 1%? Or just a little over 1%?
To be
So
precise, it's 1.33%.
yeah. So, I mean, it's literally, and this is what I found in talking with the major short litigators in the States. This is like considered almost a cost of doing business, because they get away with it a lot of times. So when they do get caught, it's like, well, they got caught, and that's the price. And if you think that Cormark was the only guilty party in Canada, well, you got to give your head a shake. Cormark is a fine company in many respects, but they're certainly less than 1% of the Canadian scene.
Yeah,
So that would be a good rule of thumb to think of. That's what if they did 600 million, there's probably 60 billion happening out there.
And if I do some math right, hopefully this is what's going to happen. If they facilitate $600 million worth of naked short selling and generated, I don't know, even 1.5%, I'm not sure if that's correct. That's $10 million in fees. 2%, that's $12 million in fees that they collected. They're now open. I'm wondering if it's only a matter of time, and maybe Save Canadian Mining might lead that, or other companies that are going to go in and use that fine as leverage to get a court order on which companies, because we're involved in that $600 million. Because if it's Georgecom, a public listed company, and I see that a big part of that was me, I think right away I open up a lawsuit for my market capitalization loss, which is $100 million, and that dwarfs that $10-12 million fees. You think that might happen or could happen?
You know what? I think that's possible because of the new class action, the laws that are now open in Canada. We spoke to the #1 short litigator in the U.S. who's won over 10 lawsuits of 10 or 11 figures, like 10 million plus, against the major banks. And now he won them, and we talked about. In fact, Eric Sprott and I were on the phone with the guy because we were thinking, well, maybe this is one of the things we could do at Save Canadian Mining is gear somebody like this up. And he did say that, even though they did win, ultimately, that these were 2 or 3 year trials, exhausting to work because they literally they've made this system so complex to track down and so difficult. You have to go to freedom of information to get information. They make it impossible to get the information. They delete the information. So the guy, obviously he's a lawyer and he's trying to sell his business, partner with people like, that could write checks and pay his fees, but he was not, he says it's no walk in the park. So, I mean, that's the practical reality. Is that thing about justice is neither swift nor necessarily fair at times. So, I'm not personally prepared to get involved in that. It's just,
you've done your part. Now it's up to somebody
crazy. That's not what Terry wants to do for fun. And this is a passion project here where I felt I could have an impact, and we could work with common sense people on a common sense cause and get something effective done. I'm not a litigator. That's just not my spirit.
But speaking of that, you do have some great news on the regulatory front now that just came out. I mean, here we are on Monday, and it came out just a couple of days ago, Friday, or the week before that.
A week ago, Friday. Yeah. So
tell us about what's come about that looks like may have a major impact on the Canadian.
Yes. So of course, there have been a task force set up. I think it's called the Ontario Modernization Task Force. Basically, that idea was to look at the Securities Act in Ontario and see what they could do to modernize it, and so that they could create a more effective capital market for Ontario, and that would hopefully drive investment, drive job creation, increase taxation, etc. So very worthy goals. And so the Minister of Finance, hired, very esteemed committee. Waleed Solomon from Norton Rose was the principal, the chairman, and you had people like Wes Hall and Cindy Tripp, and there's 5 of them, and all very qualified, conscientious people. So they met with a bunch of parties, and eventually they met with us as well several times. And so on the predatory short selling, they've got other great initiatives, which I won't speak to, but on the predatory short selling, there's really 2 things that they came back with. I mean, we want it, our holy grail for us is the tick test. Okay, we can get into what the tick test is in a second if we need to remind the viewers. But what they came back with, they didn't support us on the tick test. They thought it would be, I guess, too complicated and costly to initiate. So we'll leave that aside for a second. I said, okay, what they did come back with was a couple of things that if they're implemented properly, and that's key, then this could have a seriously positive impact on stopping predatory short selling. So the two recommendations, in particular, one was that in an offering scenario, that if people subscribe into a private placement and an offering, they're going to have to commit and sign a piece of paper that says they have not shorted that stock in advance of the offering. Because we've had too many of the, that's become just how things get done. And it's terrible because it just drives the shareholder price down. The individual investor never gets to get that benefit. It's just the institutional, just generally the hedge funds that do it. And, the companies get savage because they got no choice but to take the money.
Yeah, that's a big one. That's a really big. We see that happen all the time.
Oh yeah, all the time.
Companies.
It's theoretically illegal. It's not supposed to happen, but it's happening. But now they're going to put, they put some thought into how they stop it from happening. And as long as they follow through on that, that'll be fantastic.
So now George gets into a private placement, and it's not George are really worried about. They're worried about much bigger investors. But they say, okay, you have to sign a piece of paper that acknowledges you haven't shorted the stock going into this. That's a big one. Love that.
That's a big one. That's a big one. Second one is they're proposing a change in what they call the settlement rules. So right now in Ontario, you have T plus 2 days to settle your trade. So in other words, if you bought a stock, you got to give your cash in 2 days. If you sold the stock, you got to deliver your stock in 2 days. But there is a provision right now where you have basically plus 10. In other words, you have another 10 days after the first 2 days to deliver your stock or theory your cash. Now it's basically that's supposed to be on an exceptional basis, but we know that this is being routinely used and to basically shorts. It's like I say to people, it's like the movie Catch Me If You Can, where we had Leonardo DiCaprio writing checks, on various banks, and by the time the bank would get the check, he was gone to the next town. So it's like this with these T plus 2 plus 10. Is they just roll it over and they never declare it as a short sale, so it doesn't show up officially as a short sale, so that it isn't perceived as a short sale, yet it is a short sale, and they never actually pay for it, and they don't borrow it. It's unbelievable. So, but what they're going to do now, the proposal is they're going to go to a T plus 2 plus 4. So at the end of 4 days after the bonus, after the 2, is that either they deliver the stock, they deliver a contracted borrow, or they get bought in by the broker. So if they actually
no more catch me if you can.
No more catch me if you can.
It's a brick wall.
That would change the marketplace. So that would, look, and people have come to me and say, well, why are you against short selling? I'm saying, I'm not against short selling. I got no problem with short sellers. It's if you want to take a view on a stock and do it legitimately and borrow the stock and say, hey, I believe, this stock is going to go down and I'm going to bet against them, but I do it in a legitimate way. That's fine. That's capitalism.
I agree 100%. If George,
but if you're actually, basically, in advance of an offering, driving down the stock of a company that you're going to cover by investing, that's just like robbery. So it's got to be stopped. It's going to ruin the system, and
so that's
it's ruined it to a great degree.
That's great, Terry, that both those things have been proposed, and that was a week ago Friday.
So
when do we think? What's the word on implementation? What's the process here?
Yeah, so that's the key word, George, is proposed. So lots of things are proposed by task forces and never actually get into legislation. So we have to be very, I'm going to be talking with the Premier's office here in the next couple of days. We think they're generally supportive of small business and small investors as well. They should be.
Plus, they want to keep that tax money. They want to keep that money in Canada, right? Because if I'm shorting from a fund in the Cayman Islands through a Canadian broker, my gains are tax-free in the Cayman Islands. Whereas if you leave George and Terry to make their legitimate profit, the tax money stays here. And I think Ontario needs and Canada needs their tax dollars here now.
Yeah, so I'm very hopeful they'll focus on this implementation and get it in. We're hoping for the spring budget, and we hope that they not only implement it, but they implement it correctly and make sure the teeth are there. Because I'll tell you what, the other side has more money than God, because they've been at this for a long time. So you can be sure they're on the other side saying
money. You can finance the theft.
Let's soften this rule. Let's reduce that, because they still want to play. They still want to make lots of money, these guys. And you know, we're sick of it. We just want to say, hey, let's get back to capitalism. That's what built this country in the first place. Let's just get back to it. Investors take investment risk, you know, and companies take company risk. And you know, we don't have people taking free rides.
Let's move on. So we're looking forward to that. That's why we're going to have you back to discuss movement, maybe next 30, 40 days on how likely it is to get into the spring budget. But Terry, hats off on behalf of all small cap issuers, on behalf of all small cap investors, that you and your group, and we should mention, you've mentioned Eric Sprott, there's also Keith Newmeyer, Rob McEwen, and a lot of other supporters.
We've got a very, like, we must have 30 or 40 companies now have come in and supported us, and we wouldn't have been able to, you know, because, you know, what do I know about lobbying government? Zero. So I hired like Stossick and Associates. They've done a great job. You know, people at 6X, they did a super job supporting us. So we're very fortunate to get a good team together, and it's all been about the team. And
what you pulled off, man, I'm telling you, they're gonna make a movie. I'm gonna make a movie about it.
As my mother would say, it ain't over until it's over. So,
True.
So we'll feel like we pulled something off, and they actually legislate change. Then we can you know, get back to just making business and, you know, trying to make a profit.
Fingers crossed. So we can't have this conversation without talking about the great Wall Street bets, GameStop short squeeze. So, and here's a radically different approach: Save Canadian Mining, lobbying, data, advocacy, multiple meetings, you know, the traditional way, right? Here comes Wall Street Bets, 3-4 million members of its Reddit, of its subreddit, and they decide, to hell with these predatory shorts. They're 140% short on a stock, which is impossible. Let's kill them. Question: what do you think about what they did? You know, a lot of traditional people think it was wrong, maybe even manipulative, maybe even illegal. You know, what's your view when you saw that taking place?
You know, I don't know enough about the legalities of these things, but I look at it as a moral thing and say, you know, I think, as my perception is it started off as these guys saying, hey, you know, these guys have illegally shorted 140%, which should be not possible, and so they're offside. So let's buy stock and squeeze them. That, to me, on a moral basis, sounds like a reasonable deal. You know, I don't have any problem with people, you know, observing stupid behavior and punishing people for it.
Sure.
Because hey, the other guy does it to you all the time. So he says, you know, you buy some stock promote that's up there, and they'll just whack it down and say, well, you were dummy, you bought this thing, you should have done your due diligence. Well, it turns out these guys did their due diligence, and you know, I think, you know, I mean, I don't think they've gone around and colluded, you know, door to door. It seems to be like a general interest that's got a passion to do this. So I don't know what, you know, again, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but morally, for me, I don't have an issue with their approach, and I think it's probably done a tremendous amount of good of exposing the absolute crap that's out there that happens all too often to individual investors and individual companies.
I'll even chime in a little bit on the legal side, which is there's no collusion here, because at the end of the day, it's a bunch of people in the chat forum. They really have no idea when a guy posts, I just bought 10,000 shares. Nobody knows if he actually did or not.
Yeah,
right?
Of course. Absolutely.
Nobody knows if I turn around and sold it the next day. There's no collusion. It's just a bunch of people, great people, courageous, fired up, pissed off, you know, put all of it together and said, and, you know, they all moved together. You must have been thrilled to see that. Did you have any bad feelings at all for the fact that Melvin Capital lost 53%, so $13.5 million, to make the math easy, pretty much $7 billion they lost just in the month of January?
I did not, you know, I mean, you know, because nobody was crying when our mining stocks were plunging. You know, it was like, sort of, suck it up, buttercup, you know, let's, you know, do a better job, find it on your first drill hole. You know, it's like, it was only so easy, you know. So I mean, I'm not the type of guy that wishes harm or badness on anybody. I wish everyone the best, you know, and you know, I always try to treat people like you want to be treated yourself, you know. So but you know, I think this has exposed an issue in the system. So these guys have done a tremendous job for capitalism in exposing a broken system. So the message here isn't, don't shoot the guys that exposed it, take their great learning and apply it and change the system for the better, so that we can get a healthy system. Because if we have a healthy system, capitalism works better than anything else. And
you had two kinds of reactions out of the elites. You had government, Congress, and senators who said, let's look into this. There's a problem, and we want to get to the bottom of this, as in, why are companies short selling to the tune of 140% of a company's float? But then you had Wall Street come out and say, this is wrong because A, it's manipulative. So we talked about that. B, the argument I really hate is retail investors don't know what they're doing. They're going to get hurt. They shouldn't be able to do things like this. I'm assuming what I know your reaction to Congress, which is great. What's your reaction to Wall Street when they say, hey, George and Terry don't know what the hell they're doing. We shouldn't be allowing this, and we should be regulating this kind of behavior?
Yeah, well, they don't have any problem when they're trying to sell us Enron, when we're all euphoric about buying Enron or all the crap we bought from these guys over the years. So it's got to work both ways. You can't be sucking and blowing, so it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I will add in, I hate the argument, which is retail investors are going to get hurt. This stock is going to crash, and a lot of people are going to get hurt. And I'll tell you, there are two reasons why I hate it. One, we don't know what's going to happen to the stock at the end of the day. It's a market. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if GameStop was back down to $50 a share in a month. I wouldn't be surprised about that. But what the fallacy in their logic is that they assume that George bought the stock at $350 a share and rode it all the way down to $50 a share. They don't give any respect to the fact that retail investors are going to manage their positions accordingly. So maybe I did buy $350 a share, but I'm out at 335, and maybe Terry bought at 335 and he's out at 320. So yeah, we're taking some losses, but this fallacy of George mortgaged his house to buy stock at 350 and rode it all the way down to $5 again is bullshit.
Yeah, mostly being done in hopes that they can get the regulators to come in and save their ass, and unwind the trade. That's really what they're hoping.
And it doesn't sound like it.
What the crocodile tears for the retail guys from the hedge funds.
And it doesn't sound like it, right? From what the U.S. senators in Congress are talking about, they want to look at the hedge fund activity, not at the investors' activity.
Well, and I think that's where it should be. I'm sure there's many fine hedge fund people out there that are actually, appropriately investing and doing, proper work. But, these guys tried to take shortcuts, have been taking advantage of situations over the years, got greedy. Now they're going to pay the price. And that's called capitalism. And we shouldn't be bailing those guys out.
From Melbourne.
Yeah.
No, do you think this is a one-off, Terry? Do you think this is a one-off where retail investors have amalgamated, today it's Wall Street Bets, maybe tomorrow will be somewhere else, and are going to continue fighting this? And if so, do you think that's healthy?
Yeah, I think it's healthy, until there's a change, because you've often heard about holding your contractor, to his contract, or holding people's feet to the fire to finish their job. And it's like, what, legislators are great for saying, oh, we're going to look after that, but the execution is often, where they fall short. So I got no problems with them continuing on their merry way of identifying the ridiculous situation in the market until there's a correction, until they actually make the changes that will make sure this doesn't happen and that we do have fair and transparent markets.
Yeah, these imbalances, you've got to, if you woke up today and we've got Lynch George fund and we're overly short on something, way off in balance, we've got to start thinking and looking at each other and say, maybe we should start covering this position, because if they turn their sights on us, we could lose 50% of our fund in a month.
Yeah, one of our Save Canadian Mining guys sent me a interview with one of the legendary short sellers, and he said, and this is why I say I'm not against short selling, because this guy was one of the guys, his name just slipping my mind for a second, but was one of the top 5 or 6 guys like Einhorn and people like that. who actually look at, bullshit businesses that somehow grew big, that, on a lot of dubious, numbers, and they call them out, and then they ultimately save, a lot of people a lot of money by doing that and stopping the lies and crap. So those guys have a valuable role to play in the capitalist system. So there's nothing wrong with those short sellers.
Sure.
Okay, but he was a pretty sharp guy. And he said there's 3 buckets. That's one bucket, very small bucket. And he said, unfortunately now my friends, because he's more retired, he said they're getting tarred with that brush, so he says that's sort of tough on them. But he says, the guys that are the smash and grab guys, he says those guys deserve the book to be thrown at them. And I think that's fair. So you got a pendulum in politics and economics swings both ways. So this is finally a swing coming back to hopefully transparency, free enterprise, a proper personal responsibility, and that would be a welcome change.
Yeah, I didn't think about this, but I'm going to add this on as a question. Do you think that this has had an impact on the CSA, the Canadian Securities Association, OSC, IIROC, provincial ministries of finance, who are saying, you know what, Terry and Save Canadian Mining have been telling us this is a problem for years, and they've showed us the data, and wow, now this is front page news. Billions of dollars are being decimated out of short sellers funds and so on and so forth. Maybe we need to maybe we need to get ahead of this and show some leadership. Do you think this actually may have been a gift?
That's honestly, George, that's what we're hopeful for. I mean, because again, when we started this, all we wanted to do was to make some changes and then move on with our life. Because this is, again, I'm not a lobbyist for fun. It's generally not a fun job. So but if this movement can help us get these rule changes implemented and actually get a really healthy, vibrant capital market system here in Ontario, which we should have, we could create a lot of value for our province, our citizens, and ourselves. So it would be really a great outcome.
And you know what? The cities, provinces in this country need it now more than ever.
Given
what's happening.
Totally.
Man,
totally.
We need junior resource companies and junior tech companies and junior biopharma, bioscience companies to thrive or die on their own.
Yes.
But what we don't need right now, when jobs are so precious, economic activity, tax revenue is so precious, a bunch of freaking guys in the Cayman Islands or somewhere else with these short funds that are just smashing people with a bigger deck illegally just because they got a bigger deck of chips and then running. So, man, thanks a lot again for everything you've done. Thanks for what you guys did to drive that first stake in the ground with the OSC's and IIROC bounty letter on October 1st. Thank you for what you've done to get the CSA to make these recommendations just 10 days ago. And sometimes everything is serendipitous. Maybe everything happens for a reason. And right at the peak of your efforts and advocacy, when decisions are being made and you're starting to get some movement, you also get the gift of Wall Street Bets, GameStop really shining the biggest light in the planet on it. And you might have a bunch of regulators saying, we got to get ahead of this. Terry's been right all along, man.
In business, George, it's far better to be lucky.
But you have to be prepared, and you
got to be prepared. It's like my father used to say: the harder he works, the luckier he gets. So I think there's a lot of that too. But we're certainly hopeful that this Wall Street Bets focus will translate into great legislative change here in Ontario and across Canada, so that we can be the junior capital markets that really are the envy of the world, because that's really what we could be, and that would be phenomenal because we've got everything else, but if we could get that eradicated, then we could really rock. And Lord knows, in the post-COVID world, we're going to need all the help we can get.
To everyone at home, you've been watching or listened to Terry Lynch. He's the founder of Save Canadian Mining, which is also backed by some pretty tremendous people. and he'll tell you that first. But because of their efforts, take a look at what the TSX Venture Index has done since October 1st. I had the number in front of me earlier, but I think it's up 33.5 or 35% since then as a result. And guys, I'm going to tell you straight up, Terry's not going to say it, or he's going to be humble about it, but they just wouldn't have got there. The OSC and IIROC and CSA just would not have got there if it wasn't for the efforts of Save Canadian Mining to show data, a lot of analysis that proved it beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was taking place. So thank you, Terry. Thanks to everyone at home who's been watching or listening. Make sure you come back for the next one, because we might see some changes that'll change the nature of junior Canadian markets for the next decade. And let's hope for that. Thanks for joining us.
George, just before you go,
Sure.
one last thing. We're up 33%. The research that we did, just to showed that, in fact, historically, Canadian stocks on the mining side used to run basically at or slightly above the commodity index. So in metals and mining index would run slightly at or above the mining index. Since the tick test went out, it's now at 35%, so 65% below. So stocks will have to triple. So we're up 33%. Brother, there's a long ways to go. So I'll leave you with that thought.
Perfect way to leave it, Terry, from your mouth to the market's ears. And I don't doubt that for a second. Thanks for joining us, Terry. Everyone at home, watch, listen, stay vigilant, and hopefully we're going to get a great result here in the next couple of months to officially drive it home from a legislative point of view. Make sure you get yourself over to Save Canadian Mining. Terry, savecanadianmining.com, right there it is.
SaveCanadianMining.com. Please join the force, and help out if you can. And please, it's as we've seen in the U.S., the power of the individual is enormous when they work together. So there you go.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. See you next time.
Cheers.